and welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. Today, a report in the UK has put in black and white what apologists for Islamic terror, both in India and worldwide, have been in denial about for very long. And the report says that radical Islamists today are the biggest threat to civil society. A threat that ironically has been underplayed by various quarters because of their political correctness, effectively blunting the efforts to eliminate the threat. We will tell you why this resonates in India, but first let's tell you what this document is all about. What we are referring to is an independent review of UK's anti-terror program PREVENT. This program was started in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks in the US to stop radicalization and violence in the UK. This review now flags the threat posed by militant Islamism, calling it the largest terror threat currently in the UK, with 80% of the live probes currently in the country related to it. Remember, this comes on the back of attacks on Hindus and Hindu symbols across UK. Whether it was Leicester or Birmingham, all of the stories that we first broke here on Times Now. Despite all available evidence at that time, remember, it was the Hindus in the UK who were blamed for fanning the violence. We were told because the Hindus went about praying in their temples, doing Garba on a festival, that is the reason that they were targeted by an Islamist mob, which eventually was given a long rope. All of the recommendations made in this UK government report by William Shawcross have been acknowledged, accepted and appreciated by the Home Department as well.
The UK's counterterrorism strategy contest is made up of 4 Ps: prevent, pursue, protect and prepare. Preventing radicalisation into terrorism in the first place is critical to defeating the threat. With thanks to William Shawcross and his superb independent review of PREVENT, we now understand where real reform is required to strengthen our fight against radicalisation, to ensure we are taking every possible step to protect our country from the threat posed by terrorism. More will be done to disrupt radicalisers and extremists, and we will deliver better training and guidance to improve understanding of the ideological nature of terrorism. Britain is a tolerant, welcoming and open society. For everyone to feel at home here, extremism must be rooted out.
Well, this explosive report has blown the lid off the cover that has been provided for long to Islamist terror, citing the stabbing in particular of author Salman Rushdie in New York last year as one of the cases in point. The author says that there is more to be done to improve our understanding of blasphemy as part of a wider Islamist threat. It should be identified, it should be addressed, and it should be countered. But before we do any of that, it first has to be accepted. Because remember that it is this very same Blasphemy Brigade which was out on the streets of India, threatening the beheading of anyone who insulted their religion. And all of this happened in plain sight after former BJP spokesperson Nupur Sharma's comments on TV. Sir Tan Se Juda chants unfortunately was seen echoing from Kashmir to Kolkata, open calls baying for blood that ended up taking the lives of people, of Kanhaiya Lal in Rajasthan and Umesh Kole in Maharashtra. But even then we were told, if anyone is at fault, it is not those who are crying for people's head, it is the victims themselves. for years, this threat has been flagged up in India. We've seen its consequences play out on our streets. We've seen the consequences drenched in blood. But despite that, people willfully remained in denial, even whitewashed. The question now is, with this UK report, and this is not some right-wing or some trolls or some Islamophobic government in India that is flagging off this terror threat, it is a UK report. Will all of those apologists and deniers finally open their eyes and accept the reality?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining us now, activist Rahul Easwar, Wasiq, who's a counter-extremism analyst, joining us from London, Anirban Banerjee, political analyst. My first question is to you, Shoaib Jamei, president of the Indian Muslim Foundation. It's now in black and white, and the UK report commissioned by the UK government has accepted that at present Islamist terror threat is the largest threat facing their country.
Padmaja, there is a perception in the Hindi belt that if a man or woman is suited, booted in a modern attire and speaks in English, he or she will tell the very truth. And people believe in that. But this is not the case here. Actually, agenda is agenda. Let me expose the hypocrisy. You are saying that this UK report is very credible and it needs to believe on this. But the same report came as a UK as a BBC documentary from the UK is not credible for the gangs here. This is called
comparing apples and pineapples, sir.
Shoaib Jamei, you also know very well that comparison was very farcical, and I'm sure you know that already. But because you need to make a point in defense of the indefensible, you would say something so farcical.
No.
One
Padmaja
is a BBC documentary, which while we agree they have the full right to make, it was very low on facts and it goes against what the Supreme Court of India has already adjudged based on facts. So let's leave aside BBC for a second. We are talking here about a report, sir, which has been commissioned by the government of UK, and all its findings have been accepted by the government of UK. We are talking about a government. We are not talking about an organization with its inherent biases. But now let me come down to
just 20 seconds.
Sir, I don't care for anyone's suit and boot. When we saw on our own streets people who were neither suited nor booted, baying for somebody's blood, that's all the evidence we needed. Now, hold on a second.
You are a very mature anchor.
I am very mature, that's true, which is why I will now maturely quote from a report. Okay, go on. 20 seconds. But please don't bring in BBC. It's very farcical. I don't want to derail the debate.
Is this a democracy?
Make a point.
Is this a kind of journalism you are doing, Padma?
Sir, I am doing a journalism which will not be farcical.
For a 30 second only.
Go on. 30 seconds, but no farcical comparisons. Go on.
Let me complete my point.
Yeah.
See, my concern is, and also it should be a concern for you, just barely 2 kilometers from the Parliament of the India, everyday hate speech is going on. Few days ago, a Hindu saint has openly called for the genocide of Muslims and Christians. Openly.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. You know, actually, this is very interesting. Hold on a second, sir. You still haven't addressed the issue of how there is radical Islamism which has claimed lives in India, and this is not about somebody in a suit or a boot or without suit or boot. Sir, will you address the issue at hand? You have addressed everything except what I'm saying. Anyone who is making these calls close to Parliament should be arrested, and by the way, last I checked, these people were arrested. The issue of Dharm Sansad has gone to court. People have been booked. Yati Narasimhan was thrown behind bars as he should be. Now, if he's out on bail, there's nothing I can do about it.
There is no arrest. Do you have the guts to raise this issue on a national television? See the audacity. You are
We have so many debates.
Where is that?
We have so
Which
many
issue?
debates.
Every single issue has been raised, and it's not about any guts, sir. I have absolute guts
Can
to
I point out one
say
thing?
that anyone who makes incendiary calls against Muslims should rot in jail. Do you, sir, in your words, have the guts to say...
doesn't have guts to speak on this issue?
Sir, don't worry about anyone's guts. Let the guts stay where they are.
From you.
Hold on a second, Rahul Easwar. Give me last 20 seconds. Mr. Jamei,
Jamai Sahab.
Okay, Rahul Easwar. Obviously,
Jamai sir,
when you
just
don't
two
want to
submissions,
answer the
please,
questions, you will go to people's
Jamai sir.
guts and their kidneys and their liver, but you will
Jamai sir, just
sidestep
two
the
submissions.
issue at the heart of the entire matter. Rahul
Jamai Sahab,
Easwar.
just two submissions. One, every right-thinking Hindu will condemn Narasimhanan. I am a person, a practicing Hindu who gave complaint against Satvi Prachi for her Islamophobic comments. Nobody will support them. But at the same point of time, we openly acknowledge that there are some hardliners. The issue with the Islam, many in Islamic community like you is, you don't acknowledge the issue. Let me quote, 1979, November 20, even the holy Mecca was attacked by Islamists. Nearly 500 people were killed. We saw what happened to Pakistan. Even the believers inside a mosque were subjected to bomb blast. Do we want such kind of a radical Islamic country in India? We need to fight this cancer of terrorism, and we should be intellectually honest. Please don't have a victimism card that everybody is going to blame you. Every community may have hardliners, but we should be open enough to admit and cleanse these
And
people.
that really is the bottom line, to acknowledge and address Waseek. What did it take for the UK to first seek this review and then actually accept these findings? More importantly, it's very eerie because some of these findings mirror what we are hearing on television today and what our political class told us about these beheading cries over the last 1 year. Let me quote to you some of these findings. Defense of Islam's prophet, key motivator behind attacks. Basically saying that if you are going to say anything about the prophet, we will attack you, and it's perfectly justified. Then there is about how there is an attempt to portray Muslim communities as under constant attack and often uniquely targeted in comparison to other religious communities, stirring an undue sense of alarm, resentment and anger, exactly what Mr. Shoaib Jamei is doing right now. Do you find a lot in common in what is happening in the UK and in India? Waseek.
Well, yes, thank you. First of all, to address your first question in terms of why this review was commissioned in the first place, it's not that the government were not cognizant of the Islamist threat. Of course they were. That's exactly why Prevent came into conception in the first place. The point of the review is to see how well it's doing. And unfortunately, at the moment, it's not doing particularly well in terms of the Islamist threat that we're facing here in the United Kingdom. Now, the report has made some very disturbing links in terms of Islamists across different international regions, particularly Pakistan, and particularly when we see some of the stuff that's happening in terms of Bharat, when politicians from the BJP make problematic statements, and then you see a bunch of Muslims just losing themselves and seeking the head of them. So of course there's some comparisons. In fact, only last year a film was released that was talking about the Prophet Muhammad's family, and this was released by Shia Muslims, and then what we saw was Sunni extremist Muslims out there protesting and actually preventing that film from being seen. We need to put this into context. The UK has freedom of speech and it also has freedom of belief, but what it doesn't have is people who can choose to pressure cinemas to prevent something like this from being seen, whereas obviously in Bharat it's slightly different over there. But we're absolutely not in any kind of denial that Islamist extremism exists. I mean, the fact that we had 900 Muslims from the UK travel to ISIS and join them is testament to that fact.
So there is very clear link between the kind of radicalism that is growing in the UK and the terror activities at Atiq Ahmed, and also the same thing that is happening in India as well. Mr. Atiqur Rahman.
Well, Padmaja, this malignant tumor of radicalization should end. But I am of the opinion that this can end only with a surgeon's knife, not with a communal weapon. We are into this radicalization and extremism since years together. Are the governments taking proper action as far as the Indian context in this regard goes? I have said on every platform, blasphemy, the concept does not exist in the Quran. I am trained to answer to the misconceptions related to Islam and its Prophet, be there anything related to Prophet Muhammad. I am not into getting offending or offensive of this kind. Let anybody have any I will answer them. My Prophet and my Islam stands for peace, tolerance and forgiveness.
That's great. Then Shoaib Jamei, what actually explains you or people like Mr. Gandhi, who in the advent of people taking to the streets and giving cries of Sartan Se Juda said this: the BJP and the RSS has created an environment of hate and anger in this country, and frankly, because of this, we are seeing the scenes on the streets.
We need to
let me answer you, Padmaja. Just one question. This Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom, barely a few months ago, she was at the far end of the criticism by the Indian media because she had made some anti-India statements, and now she become hero for the Indian media because she criticized the some Islamic radicalization or Islamic terrorism. Okay, fine. Just let me put a question to my friend from the United Kingdom, Wasik. Sir, in India, every day hate speech is going on, barely 2 kilometers away from my home, from the parliament. Men in the saffron clad have made open call for the genocide of the Muslims and Christians in India. What kind of perception is there in UK, and how the government look into that, and how the civil society of the United Kingdom are looking into this kind of matter? Is this a right or wrong?
Go on, answer that.
Raise the issue or not?
But that being said, you still haven't addressed the matter at the heart of the whole thing, Shoaib Jamei, about what you have to say about the report. I will have Wasik answer it, but can you finally confirm to me that just like the UK report calls Islamist terror the biggest threat, you will agree it is a threat in India as well? I won't even say the biggest threat. Will you accept that it is Islamic terror and radicalization, Mr. Jamei?
Of course, I always denounce any kind of radicalization. I always say that there is no place for radicalization in a civil society.
That is a platitude. My question to you is not that. My question is that going by what we saw on the streets of India in the aftermath of Nupur Sharma episode, do you agree that that is an outcome of Islamic radicalization and Islamist terror?
India have threat from the Islamic radicalized organization as well as the saffron-clad right-wing organizations equally. And it should be dealt equally without any biasness. But we have seen biased operation of the government, of the policemen, when they made to arrest of the... If there is a name with Urdu, it will be dealt severely.
Okay, I am at least glad that it has taken you this long, but you have finally acknowledged that there is such a thing as Islamic radicalization and Islamist terror in India, because so far even that wasn't acknowledged. Go on. Wasik, the question that is it fair to single out Islamist terror as the biggest threat when right-wing terror also exists, or right-wing radicalization exists in the UK, in India and elsewhere?
Yeah, so no, I think the framing of the question is problematic. We're not focusing on Islamist terror for some biased reason. We're focusing it based on the data. If we look at, for example, referral rates for Prevent, which is what this review is about, we've seen that over a course of 6 years, it was Islamist extremists that were referred to the program more so than extreme right-wing terror. But because of political correctness, because of people wanting to frame it as equal threats or things like that, we've seen that there's been a rise in referrals for extreme right wing, when clearly the threat and the actual attacks have been manifesting from Islamist extremists. So the report is quite clear that it's led by the data, it's not led by opinions or bias. And I don't think that that's a particularly helpful way from my learned friend who was asking a question to be framing it in that way. We need to go by what the data says, not by whataboutery, which essentially, in my view, he seems to be engaging in.
And if you keep engaging in this whataboutery and political correctness, you will end up pushing under the carpet a reality which is now being acknowledged worldwide. It is not about what Suella Braverman has said, it is about what the data tells you, and it is a reality of today's times that we need to open our eyes to. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much, all gentlemen, for joining me.